So the first question is just, who are you? We just want you
Yeah,
to introduce yourself.
I'm Susan Rico, and I am from the South. I was raised in Atlanta, Georgia, moved to California about 35 years ago, so now I'm a Southern Californian. This is my home. I'm a retired engineer, and I'm married and have a cat, and I like to travel and do art and be with my friends.
Can you share a bit about your family background?
Yeah, so since I was raised in the South, as you might imagine, it's a more conservative area than Southern California. So my upbringing was mostly around conservatives and Christians. It was very Christian conservative family and neighborhood, and just everybody was just more that way. And so that had a strong influence on me forming who I was. And then in my 20s, I moved to California and started to see a more diverse group of people and points of view and ethnicities and, just a whole melting pot of ideas and cultures. And I think that started to change me a little bit too. I think I started to become a little more open-minded and thinking about more possibilities than what I understood growing up. So I think those years were formative, just making that change and meeting more different people who are different from me.
What's one unique thing about you that people might not guess right away?
I think it would be that I'm an introvert. I think people have a misunderstanding of introverts. I love being around people. I love contact with people, with my friends and family, but I always need to step back afterwards and kind of, take a break for myself to re-energize. But people think that I must be extroverted because I'm chatty and I love to talk to people and love to engage, but I am an introvert.
What initially motivated you to get involved in addressing political polarization?
Well, I think it was mostly just interactions with dear friends of mine and family members. Political discussions began to get more tense and fraught, and then there were a few instances where it became pretty ugly pretty fast, and I was a part of that, feeding into that. And I knew there was a problem, and I felt like I had a problem as well. And so I saw a advertisement for a Braver Angels workshop, and they were talking about doing some work on polarization. As soon as I heard that, it just kind of resonated deep inside me, and I thought, well, I want to see what that's about. So that kind of gave me a positive direction to go with those negative feelings from those bad interactions. I wanted to try to turn it into something positive. And so I saw this workshop and I attended, and it was really pretty life-changing for me.
What are the main goals of your work in fighting political polarization?
My personal main goals, we have the organization of Braver Angels and their goals, but my personal goals are, I would like to see a return to civility with each other, a place where we can have civil discourse and respect each other and hear different ideas than what we have and walk away from it still respecting the other person and their ideas, even though they're different from ours. I just would really like to see a return to that. I think we used to have that in our country, and I think we've lost it to a large degree. And another personal goal of mine, quite frankly, is political reform. I'd like to see political reform in terms of improving our democracy, putting forth democratic reforms that make our electoral process work better and have our government more representative of the majority of the people, and come up with practical solutions that most people could probably agree to. I think we can get there. That's a personal goal of mine. Braver Angels as an organization is more about just bringing down the affective polarization, and that by effective it means the emotional part of polarization, like feeling disdain for someone who has a different point of view. So, yeah.
In your opinion, what are the key factors contributing to the current state of political division, and how do you think they can be addressed?
Well, I think number one is, the most difficult one is money. I think there's a lot of money involved in this. And I think there are actors out there, be they individuals or large entities, that we call them conflict entrepreneurs in Braver Angels. And that means they're making money off of conflict. And that can be, it could be politicians, it could be the media, it could be a corporation, it can be individuals, and it also can be bad actors around the world. I think there are bad actors out there who are sowing conflict and trying to use it to their advantage. So I think these are really difficult forces to push against. But there seems to be a really big groundswell in this country pushing against those forces, which gives me hope.
What would an ideal, less polarized society look like to you, and what role do you see yourself playing in achieving that vision?
I would like to see a society where there's just less time spent on politics. It seems to be occupying so much of our daily lives and our thoughts, and it didn't used to be that way. I don't think we had that on our minds so much in the past. Well, maybe there were times in the past when it was, like take the Civil War or the turmoil of the 60s. But I'd like to get back to a time where we just don't really spend that much time thinking about it, because things are working pretty well and most people are pretty happy about the way things are going. Again, that's an ideal. I mean, you can call me a Pollyanna for wishing for that, but hey, I'll take that label. That's what I would like to work towards.
Do you have any personal stories or experiences related to political polarization?
Yeah, I do. I've got so many, and I think I'll bring up the most recent one that happened just before the holidays, so this was very recent. I was invited to a dinner party with a group of friends who are all very liberal, I would say. And I don't call myself very liberal. I would probably identify most as classical liberal or more libertarian. But they were talking about the election and Trump, and just they couldn't believe, how can this person have gotten elected again? They just were dumbfounded and just couldn't understand how this could happen. And I piped up and I used some of my Braver Angel skills, and I sort of gently interjected that, well, I have a few ideas, because I've been talking to people on the other side about why they might have voted for Trump and supported him. But then I kind of baited them a little bit. I said, well, but maybe it's not appropriate to say here in this setting. And so that they kind of took the bait. They said, oh no, we want to talk about it. If you have ideas, we'd like to hear them. And I was like, oh, okay. So by them buying into wanting to hear some different ideas, that kind of opened the door. So I started to share a few things that I've heard from people on the other side, and they nodded their heads. And one of the things I talked about was the transgender issues, and they were nodding and thinking, yeah, I can see that. I can see why someone would have that point of view. So it just cracked the door open a little bit, and I think that's all you really need to do as a first step. So anyway, that was a good recent example. I have so many I could tell you. That's just one that comes to mind. But they can happen all the time. I take the skills I learned in Braver Angels, and I'm still learning, and just bring those into interactions with other people, and just approach things from a more point of view of curiosity and just wanting to know more about the other person and what brought you to the ideas you have and your positions. And things tend to go more smoothly if you approach it that way. I found I'm not always good at it. People get under my skin too. And I had a recent interaction with a dear friend she's been a friend for 35 years probably, and I felt like she was crossing boundaries with not being civil, one too many times for me. And I felt like I had made it clear where my boundaries were, and they've been crossed too many times. So unfortunately, I believe that friendship might be over. I'm not sure. Maybe a door can be opened in the future, but we all have our boundaries, and so I found mine there. So I guess that's an example of where sometimes it doesn't work. So you just have to, take it one situation at a time and see whether there's an opening, or if it's too much for you, you can back off. You kind of just judge each situation on its own.
are some of the biggest challenges you've encountered while working to reduce polarization?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges is the way we've sort of sorted ourselves as a society and gotten ourselves into like different ecosystems of information. People tend to go to media sources that kind of feed their preconceived notions of the world and of policy. And I think that's a natural thing to do. But now it's just with so many sources of information. Now people are just can be in entirely different ecosystems, and then it's so difficult to understand when someone else just is seeing and hearing such different things than you. And we're even sorting ourselves geographically. I mean, people are actually moving to either red areas or blue areas to be around people that they agree with more. So I see that as a really huge problem. And one problem we've seen in the depolarization movement particularly is attracting reds. That is, people who learn more conservative are, it's hard to build that trust with them. There's a trust that's been lost, and that's understandable. And so I think those of us who don't see ourselves as red-leaning need to work harder to rebuild that trust. And I think that's a big challenge for us.
What methods or strategies have you found to be most effective in fostering dialogue between people with opposing political views?
There's so many. Oh gosh. And I've learned a lot of these techniques through Braver Angels, and I'm still learning. But I think one of the most important things is to approach interactions with a sense of curiosity about the other person and get to know them first. You lay that groundwork, and then you open up the trust and the relationship in that way, and that will help the discourse quite a bit. So just come in with curiosity about their background, what life experiences have brought them to the views that they have, and they are probably very different than yours, especially if you're politically different. I also find that making I statements is an important thing. Speak for yourself and your feelings, and try not to talk about they or them or big groups of people with a broad brush, because we're all individuals, and I think it's more important to talk about yourself and your point of view on things. And also don't say you a lot, you this, you that. You're projecting things onto another person that they might not appreciate. And another thing too is talking about specific policies rather than dogma. So when you make dogmatic statements about an issue, like a big statement about the whole of an issue, that can be really difficult. So it's better to try to drill down into specific policies where you think you might be able to find some common values and common ground.
How do you approach conversations that feel like they're stuck in a polarized cycle? Are there any specific tactics you use to break through?
Yeah, I think it's just some of the things that I just mentioned, some of those tactics of just radical curiosity. And I know you've talked about empathy, and we might be talking about that next, but just turning up the empathy, I think, can be very helpful. Mm-hmm. And try to see things from another person's point of view as much as you can.
So speaking of empathy,
yes.
How do you think people can develop empathy when dealing with those with radically different views and backgrounds?
Yes, I think that can be such an important tool. And hearing the stories and hearing the emotions and the feelings of another person and what they've gone through can help develop that empathy, which is a really important part of the first step in understanding and respecting the other person's point of view in the world. But I also think sometimes empathy can be a problem. There can be too much empathy or empathy that gets in the way. And that's in the form of, for instance, wanting to help people. So you might see people on the left more wanting to help everyone they see that needs help, like the person on the corner asking for money or whatever. And I know I'm generalizing here, but I think on the left there might be a feeling of more, this person is in need. I see a person in need in front of me and I need to do something. Whereas I think someone on the right might have a more detached point of view and say they do still have the deep empathy for the person, but there's more like let's step back from the emotions and think about how can I actually do something that will help this person or groups of people in a more productive way. So that might be a controversial view, that sometimes empathy can be not so helpful, but it's just one of those things that too much of a good thing can sometimes get in the way.
Can you share a success story or moment that made you feel as though your efforts were truly making a difference?
Yes, I will say after almost every Braver Angels event that we have, it feels like a success story. People come out of our workshops and our events saying, oh my gosh, we are not as divided as we've been told we are. They have this idea of other people that they've been told by the media and reinforced by the media, but when they come face to face with you and have those conversations and really get to know each other and the reasons behind their points of view, it tends to, sorry, I lost my train of thought. It tends to break those things down. So so after the events that we have really work well to bridge that gap, and we hear it from people as they come out that, I'm looking at things differently now. I'm going to talk to people on the other side differently. It doesn't work every time and it doesn't work with every individual, but I've seen enough success to where I think this really works. And I think it works because it's rooted in techniques that are proven to work. That is in family therapy. One of the founders of our organization is a family therapist, and he's developed a lot of our workshops and events, and that's why they work. And there's even some research, academic research, to show that it really does work.
Looking back at your journey in combating polarization, how has your understanding of the issue evolved over time?
The issue of polarization, I mean, this may not be directly answering the question, but I'll just say that I think I understand the different sides much better than I do, and that we're not really as polarized as we think. And I recently took let's say about 2 years ago, I took a quiz online. It's called Perception Gap. You can look at a Perception Gap quiz online. You take the quiz and it asks you, how do you think the views of the other side are on these different issues? Like, how do you think they feel about this issue, that issue, and so on? And I took that quiz some time back, and then after a lot of work in Braver Angels, I went back and I recently took that quiz again, and I did a lot better at predicting what the other side on these issues, how they feel about them. And it just shows me that this work, it really is effective, because now I have a better understanding of what the other side actually truly feels about certain issues. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but
That's good.
was that okay? All right.
And then what gives you hope for the future when it comes to reducing polarization?
I think it's just how many people are longing for this work and seeking out this work of depolarization. Our organization of Braver Angels has grown exponentially, really, over the last, it's been 8 years, more than 8 years they've been operating, and it just continues to grow. And there are so many other organizations out there doing the same work. And I come upon new ones all the time, and individuals like yourself who are doing this work. So just, it gives me hope and for the future that so many people are seeking this out.
For someone just beginning to think about how they can contribute to reducing polarization, what advice would you give them?
I would say get involved. Find organizations like Braver Angels, or for young people, it's Bridge USA, or so many others there are out there who can help you with this work. You can just jump in and get involved as little or as much as you want. And for Braver Angels, all it takes is getting on the website, finding an event that interests you, and signing up and showing up. And it's all free. So there's so many things you can do. And you can also seek out news sources on the other side that are the best of the other side. You can go to, for instance, Ground News. Ground News takes news from all sides of the spectrum and presents it evenly and fairly on both sides. And so you can seek out news sources like that. I highly recommend that one in particular. Let's see. And you can just do some reading. Monica Guzman has a great book called I Never Thought of It That Way. Read that book, and it can be really life-changing, and you'll see things differently and approach interactions differently, I think, after you read that book. So there's a lot you can do.
What's the most important change you'd like to see in the broader culture to combat political polarization, and what message do you have for the American general public?
Oh gosh, I didn't so much prepare for this question. Let's see. For the broader culture, can you repeat the question again, please?
What is the most important change you'd like to see in the broader culture to combat political polarization, and what message do you have for the American general public?
Most important thing in the culture. Well, I'm not sure if this is a cultural change, but I would like people to see democracy differently and see it as a coming together in dialogue to solve problems that most people can find a way forward together on. I mean, that's a lofty goal, but I think the founder of Brave Angel said something on the order of democracy is governing through talking with each other. So without being able to talk to each other, there's no democracy. So I think I'd just like to see, a healthier democracy and maybe some changes in our democracy, some reforms can help that happen and help this broader cultural change happen.
Thank you.
Okay.